Welcome to the Book Faire Podcast. I'm Anthony, and this week we have an interview with Paul Ritchey and Nick Murphy from Continue Show about their new Audible original. PEN America releases its latest study on book bans, a collection of stories from banned authors, and little free libraries lead to an increase in reading habits of children. Let's begin first with an interview with Paul Ritchey and Nick Murphy, writers of the new Audible original, Mickey and Friends in Escape from Noskape. Nick, Paul, how are y'all doing today?
Doing great.
Fantastic.
For the audience, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and the work that we're going to be discussing today?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Nick.
sure. My name is Nick Murphy.
And I'm Paul Ritchey.
And together we wrote an audio adventure for Mickey and his friends called Mickey and Friends Escape from Noskape. It's a Audible exclusive, Audible original that you can
But also
jump onto
exclusive,
Audible
I think.
and listen. And it's an adventure. It's great.
And who are you two specifically? Where can people have seen you before, and if and what types of writing have y'all done before in the past?
Well, we've done a lot of stuff. We're filmmakers at the core. We started our career, Nick and I, working together, making videos together at a website called Gamervision, where we started a web series called Continue, which we've been doing for 15 years now. And that is a weekly show where we play a not random, but a specific video game that we've picked out for about like 30, 45 minutes, and then say if we would continue or game over. It is not family friendly. We suggest that parents watch that at nighttime. And then we kind of like through the success of that show, kicked off our career as like we made a short series called Smart Guys that we wrote. We've made a couple of we did like a pilot for Disney. We keep coming back to Disney. We did a pilot for Disney called Spooky Squad that we also wrote. And then we've done a bunch of other stuff, like short films and things like that. But then in 2019, Nick, that we wrote our first comic?
I think it might have been 2018 when we started. Because we also did a podcast called Pretend Friends, which is like a tabletop role-playing podcast where we would play characters and improvise an adventure every week. And through that, we got connected with the people at Epic, like the kids' online library, and they started doing originals, and they were looking for authors to come on and make some original comic and graphic novels for them. So we created
Cosmic Pizza Party.
Cosmic Pizza Party.
Yeah, that was our first children's. I guess Spooky Squad was aimed at a younger audience as well, but I feel like that one kind of really straddled the line. I feel like Cosmic Pizza Party was the first time we wrote with a child audience in mind. It was really fun. It was an interesting adaptation for us because we'd been doing film for so long. But comics are nice because they're kind of like a storyboard in a way. Different. There's a lot of differences, but they did use a lot of the principles that we had, like visual storytelling principles. So the transition was kind of nice. We kind of were able to transition over into that. It was easy. It was pretty easy, but there were hiccups.
And then it was interesting going from a time-based, writing and creating for a time-based medium to, writing and creating for a medium that dealt with actual live real estate and, playing with timing and pacing, not through cuts or through editing, but through, written and drawn images and the story taking place on a page with, 22
limited real estate.
Yeah. Limited real estate, like 22 pages, and editing your story that way instead of a time constraint.
The thing that was weird for us was like being like, oh, this character walks across to another part of the ship. And like in a movie, you just like write that they walk across, but like you need to, in a comic, like you can't show all of that, right? You have to jump to the like points of action, but they have to stay like legible throughout. So like learning how to like what we could omit and how we could jump around in time in a comic and save time, because you couldn't. I think there in a movie you have a little bit more freedom to kind of like Nick was saying, there's not real estate of a page, so you have time, which has its own real estate, but it's different mentality, and it was like an interesting adaptation there to change to that. But then once we got it, we felt pretty comfortable with that. I would think we really like working in comics. Yeah,
it really suits like our style and our sensibilities. And from that, we wrote on Time Buddies and Cat Ninja as well for Epic.
And you went from Continue to writing Smart Guys to a pilot for Disney Spooky Squad, and then to Epic through Epic. How does the journey get from writing for Epic to getting to Disney Press and writing for an Audible original? Is there anything on the back end, on the business side, that you're able to disclose about how that works? Because I'm sure a lot of people, aspiring writers, may not know what the process is for something like this.
Yeah, we actually don't know what the process is. I hope that somebody can one day tell us, because we are flying by the seat of our pants all the time. We're really trying to figure it out. But the editor who brought us on to Epic, has really been a champion of us and a champion of our work, brought us on to create, to write for Cosmic Pizza Party and Cat Ninja. And then he left and went to Disney, and they were, they were kind of struggling with the story a little bit. And he, we had a meeting and was like, we're really having some issues. And I know you guys are, really talented and really, really funny. I think this could be a really funny story. It feels like a perfect fit for you guys.
Yeah, so we pitched them some ideas. They liked them, and then we ended up doing it. And I think like the lesson there, it's like everyone knows networking is really important when it comes to getting opportunities. But like, I think the lesson is like the way that we ended up. I knew that editor in real life from like way back in the day, and I've just kind of been like loosely in touch with him over the years. And we posted about Pretend Friends, a podcast that we were doing, and he decided to listen to it because he liked D&D, and so and not that we were doing D&D on that podcast, but he liked role-playing games, and he checked it out, thought it was really funny, really liked the stories that we came up with, and had an opportunity and brought us onto it. And I think that just is like, I don't know, just do things, do things that might not even like necessarily feel like they're directly pushing your career forward. Like, try different things. We had never even thought about doing a role-playing podcast before.
Yeah.
But it is storytelling in its own way, and it's like improv storytelling, and it pushed us outside of our comfort zones, and it also presented an opportunity that I don't think we would have ever, when we set out to do that, we never thought that was going to lead to that opportunity. So like, I just think the lesson is push yourself, try new things, and, keep doing your work, keep writing, and keep doing all that stuff. But, get yourself out there in any way that you can, and you never know where the opportunities are going to arise from those.
And for any aspiring writers who may be listening, that the idea of networking, and it's who you know, not what you know, it's probably worth emphasizing that if y'all didn't bring solid ideas to this meeting, this wouldn't have been a deal that was made, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think he always saw more in us than I think we ever saw in ourselves. I honestly did, like Paul was saying, I don't think our career's never been a straight shot and a straight line. It's really taken all these weird twists and turns. And I think it's about being open to taking the ride and figuring out where these things are going to lead to and pay off. And sometimes they don't pay off. But I think, and I do think he saw something in us. He saw some talent and some skill in what we could bring. And I think it just kind of like clicked for him. It would be like if we were making a film, we'd be like, all right, we really want to hire this cinematographer, this camera person, and their work really resonates with us, and we would bring that person on, maybe, and they would bring more to the table than we ever saw possible. But I think he saw something in us, and I'm glad he took a shot.
Yeah, he just saw our instincts were the right instincts that, for that job, and he felt like we matched up with the first one. He kind of wanted us to do whatever we wanted to do, and it was sort of, he had like a loose idea of a book, but from what he had heard us doing on our podcast, he was like, oh, well, you guys naturally fall into this kind of storytelling method. So you'll probably be, and you have made films before, you have written things before. So he knew we had those skills. And he just knew that we could adapt to that new format. And yeah, I think what you were saying, like it definitely is who you know, but I think what you know is extremely important. Like there's like a bromide that's like, preparation and inspiration meeting or something like that. I can't remember the exact thing.
It's like opportunity is
when preparation,
luck and preparation.
Meeting, yeah. But that's true though, right? Like it's like you need to do your work. You need to show up and like write, and you need to produce things, because when that person has an opportunity, if you have something that you can show that you've done before, then you're going to be able to. That they're going to be like, well, I know I can trust this person to do that. Like Nick was saying, like when we go to like hire somebody for any sort of job that is involved in any of our productions, like we're only going to pick people that we know have those skills. And if we know them personally and they haven't done something professionally, we will have seen that they have produced something before, or, have worked with us in some other capacity where we know that they are capable of like completing a task. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is just knowing that the person has the ability to see something through to the end.
Right. And you talked about how the editor from Epic, who went on to Disney Press, saw something in you and kind of brought this to you despite not really having experience with the medium. What was it like transitioning from these previous writing projects into a scripted audio series, or a scripted audio production rather?
Yeah, I think some of those challenges that we encountered just transition, starting to write for comics was, a learning process and it's an entire different thing that you really need to retrain your brain for. I think we knew we could tell a fun story and have fun elements and fun gags. And then with it being solely audio based, it really just we really had to really just think about that medium will be fun as a viewer. I think that's something we really excel at, is like whoever the viewer or the reader is going to be experiencing what we're putting out. I think we do a good job of putting ourselves in that viewer's or reader's mindset to be like, oh, I think they would really enjoy X, Y, or Z. So I think we did some really great like audio production pieces that really fill out the whole space. But a lot of it was, early on when you're writing for film, you kind of you change the scene and then you set the stage in the sense that you just describe what is on camera in like the loosest terms possible. Like a character walks into a room. If there's an important detail about that room that needs to be conveyed, because it deals with the plot, you include it. But if it doesn't, you don't, because that's someone else's job to create that space, create that set. So we always write like that. And the note we got early on was like, you need to like fill out the space. We would just kind of be like, they walk into this mansion and they're like, you got to describe the mansion, describe it. Because I think when we were doing comics and stuff, we were a little too gung ho about describing a lot of these things.
Yeah,
so
it's been multiple transitions, right? Because like you were saying, like we had the script writing, which was like very Spartan, very like action essentials, things like that, and a lot of dialogue. And then comics is a lot of writing what the exact action is, but you also need to give the artist the freedom. You got like, we were like describing shots, right? We were like a sidelong shot or like a 2-shot or, or a close up, and things like that. And like, that was a note we got there was like, hey, you can be a little less descriptive about what the angles and the like the shots are. And you could be a little more descriptive about, maybe what's in the frame, like what props and things like that. And then when we, like Nick said, when we moved into the audio thing, it was like a total reversal of that, where it was like more detail, tons of detail, never stop giving us detail. And so like we had to, when we did our first couple manuscripts, we had to go back and like just fluff them out with like, not fluff that, because that makes it sound like it was useless writing, but like really like fill them out with a lot of like, we had so much dialogue that I think we had to like cut back dialogue and put in description, narration and things like that. Cause we were just we were writing it like a script.
On the topic of dialogue, these are characters that have been around for 50, 75, 100-ish years. I can't remember exactly when Mickey came out. What is it like handling these legacy characters? What kind of oversight or kind of editing notes were given when it came to writing for characters that not only are appealing to a very young audience, but also have been around for so long and have such established personalities?
I think everybody has an idea of who these characters are in their brain. You know, you kind of just like, okay, I can like picture them. I can picture, you know, they've been part of our lives for so long that I think everyone just has like a mental idea of what and who they are. And I think we really had to think about all the hands that have touched these characters and really like molded them. And there's definitely like a lot of different interpretations. Like when my son was young, we would watch, you know, Disney Junior and the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, which is a totally different Mickey Mouse than, you know, like Three Musketeers or the Christmas specials. They're like totally different. And then recently Disney has this new version of Mickey Mouse that's a little more cartoony and crazy. So there are different, like there's a little bit of room there to kind of figure out what the new idea of Mickey can be. And we didn't want to like reinvent any of that. We wanted to stay true to that. So they definitely helped us. They guided us a lot. You know, we spoke with some of their team to really try to hone down like which version of Mickey is this, but also at the same time, you know, I think we still wanted to push our vision of it. You know, I think our vision and our version of them is a little more cartoony, a little more silly. I feel like we're much more silly. We wanted a little more like irreverent things in there and just kind of
maybe even pushing like a little bit of like self-awareness into it, which not, you know, we didn't do too much of, but there were like little moments of self-awareness, I think. And definitely like, I think for us, like, you know, like we want to bring our voice to it. Right. And like you're asking this question and it's a great question because it's like, you kind of can't put your voice onto it too much because there is a voice, there's an established voice. So what we tried to do was create situations that were our voice, audio gags that were our voice, give them dialogue that still felt like, you know, them, but had a little bit of us in it. But then like, I think where we really got to stretch was like with the side characters in it. And that's where we really got to like invent like whole cloth, like new people and populate it with like the types of goofballs that we like to write.
Yeah, and you get to pull interesting things out of the characters when you put them in situations that we feel like they haven't been in before or that are totally original to us. It's, you know, like one of the situations we wrote was this, they get trapped in this library and there's this librarian robot that's huge and menacing and loud, which is like, well, you shouldn't be in a library at all. And it's like, how does the characters deal with that and interact with that? And how does comedy come from that? And I think there's a lot of like really fun things. So now we have Donald, who's very passionate and loud, has to be quiet and deal and you know, not be himself. So I think we were able to put these characters in some interesting things to really get some of our voice across. And
yeah, another goof that we really liked was we shrunk most of them down except for Minnie. And then we had Minnie, this high-pitched voice character. She was huge and they were tiny. So we were like, oh, it'll be really funny because she'll have this deep, like menacing voice. So we kind of made her into like a Godzilla-esque kaiju character where she's like above them, you know, like, and we just thought that like having her like transitioning from that like really deep voice back to her like high-pitched voice back in her perspective is really just like a fun little goof. And it doesn't change who she is, right? It's just our perspective on her changed, the context of her changed.
When it comes to writing, what is the collaboration process like? Because obviously you're writing a single document. It's hard to imagine two people just writing at the exact same time. How does collaborating on a script typically work for people who may not know what the process is?
The way we like to write is we tend to let one person kind of be the writer who's taking things down, and the other person will kind of guide and throw out ideas. And then we tend to just like let one person sort of do that. and then the other person can maybe jump ahead. Sometimes we'll get a little
sometimes
like
we
wild.
are like in that document,
Yeah.
like Paul's at the top and I'm at the bottom, and we're really
sometimes
kind of
it
filling
happens.
in. Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little crazy, but most of the time, one of us is sort of like dictating, and the other person will like add their thoughts in. But if someone has an idea, usually what we'll do is we'll like let that person talk and just go. And like, it's writing. So you dump a bunch of stuff out, and then the editing process is like the process where both of us sit there and we go through like piece by piece and break it apart. And we're like, all right, let's rewrite this. Let's do that.
Yeah. We've been improvising with each other for all of our career. So that feels really natural to us. So a lot of times we're really just, like Paul said, like one of us is just kind of like writing to get the idea in, but the whole time the focus is like, let's make each other laugh. And because if we're laughing and having a good time, there's something there that people can connect to because we're connecting with it.
Yeah. Like we'll like play a scene out, right? Like we'll like actually like talk and like create the like moments together. Like it's like being performed live.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a fun thing because especially with comics and stuff too, like, we're just big little kids sometimes. So we're doing like the sound effects, and then with the comics, it was like, all right, how do we like onomatopoeia this specific sound? And then to switch gears from comics to this, it was like, oh, well, now we can just be like, write in, insert goofy yell. And then it's and it's the sound effect.
I was going to ask about that. I was going to ask, did you write goofy yell? And they instantly knew which one you were talking about.
They knew. They were like, they're like, the goofy yell, just write the goofy yell. And they know to put the goofy yell. Same thing with, there was certain verbiage for Donald that they want. I can't remember exactly what it was.
There were sounds that he makes that we like specifically received. Like, here's how you write the different.
Yeah,
sounds.
I think it was like whack, like WACK.
Yeah, whack was a big one.
And then they just know that that's like he's not quacking. He's like wah, like that kind of thing. So yeah, there was a lot of cool stuff in that sense. Like when we, through our editor, she would talk to the audio team, and they were just like the audio team was having a blast apparently. So that was really good feedback for us to get. It kind of, reminded us that we were on the right track and doing the right thing. And it was such a fun collaborative process.
Mm-hmm.
And one quick question before we get to a big question to close it out. Were either of you responsible for the titles, or was that something given by the editors?
For all the chapter titles, we wrote all the chapter titles.
Because I specifically wanted to say chapter 5, the Donald decibel system.
Thank you.
Cracked me up while I was at work. Yeah. Really hard.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, that was so fun. That was like, So I love when things like when we would do comics, and Epic had a really interesting approach. When we first started, it was really just me and Paul. And then when we wrote with them for Cat Ninja, that was really cool. They wanted to try something new. So they wanted to do like a writer's room. So they would be like, well, here's the season arc. Here's this season what we're going to do. You guys we can all collaborate on what the story arc is going to be for these characters. And then each of us would take an issue and write it. So that was like a really fun collaborative kind of experience. Yeah.
That's okay. Paul, any closing thoughts on the collaboration process?
For this exact project with like Disney and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because, I mean, we've been dealing with this with like the comics too. It's like, well, comics was interesting because we would, especially the part that Nick was talking about, the writer's room, we would like do read throughs, and like, we would be like, oh, that's interesting that they read that dialogue like that. Because like when you do a script, like a film script, like when the whole time you're guiding your actors on how to like read and things like that. So it was like really interesting to like step back and hear how people read your dialogue. And I think with this one, we were like really interested too for that part where like the actors came in, and like there were a couple times where most of the side characters that we got to write for ourselves, like fully, were like pretty close to what we had imagined. But there were a couple that were like really surprising to us, but like was great to hear. Like and I think that's a really interesting part of this really unique style of writing with like an audiobook writing, like an audio play, especially one that you're not directing, was really interesting to like write something, have like a voice in your head, and then kind of hand it off without like any any collaboration on that part. And we've talked about that with them, about maybe like creating like scratch tracks or things like that, just so we can like impart like our idea. But it's like, that's a skill, right? Like being able to write your dialogue exactly how you want it said is like a really, like, I don't know. I think that's the thing, like part of this collaboration process that we're really looking to like continually like refine and evolve, is like our ability to like really nail the dialogue in a way that like it couldn't be said any other way, or like pretty clearly is said the way that it should be said.
Yeah, each one of these is such a learning process. I mean, I think initially when you're writing like narrative scripts, it's, you know, they really tell you not to do parenthetical, like character name parenthetical, like sarcastically or anything like that. That discipline is very much just let the actors handle that. And then with comics, that kind of went away because there's no dialogue, you know, there's no inflection that way. So it was nice to get back to, our editor was like, include that information, like include that parenthetical, like line delivery, so that carries throughout the entire process and doesn't get lost from, you know, just a note that you're writing through to the actual like production part of it. So I think when we continue like our next project, I think that's going to be like a very much a big thing. And like Paul was saying, like those scratch tracks and recording and doing line readings ourselves, I think will help kind of push our vision a little closer to how we're picturing in our heads.
And the final question, I ask this to all guests, so feel free to take this any direction or any way you would like. Nick, Paul, how do you see yourselves and the work that you do as a writer?
I mean, I think we're trying to be silly, but have a message that maybe isn't on the nose, but is there. I think everything that we've written so far is for children, but we want there to be like kind of a moral through line in there. There is a moral. It's not like a fable that we're delivering that's supposed to be really obvious, but like I think everything that we've had has had a message behind it that we didn't explicitly write out, but we definitely intended for it to be there in the characters and their actions and how the story plays out.
Yeah, I think our voice comes through more and more with each project and with each kind of script or manuscript that we do. It's really, I don't know, it's hard to like pinpoint what that voice is or what it sounds like or what defines the things that we write. But every time we do it, I feel like we're closer to like uncovering that. And it's such a fun journey to try to discover what that is. I mean, ultimately it's just like fun. Like we really just enjoy making ourselves laugh, making the audience laugh. And like Paul said, like, I think there's something to learn at the end of it that they can take away.
Thank you. That was an interview with Paul Ritchey and Nick Murphy. Their new original audiobook, Mickey and Friends Escape from Noskape, is available exclusively to Audible members. Next up, a look at new releases. But first, if you appreciate the work being done on the Book Faire Podcast, you can support the show in a number of ways. You can like, comment, or rate the show wherever you are listening, as well as follow on Blue Sky at Book Faire Pod. You can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair, where episodes are typically posted early with links to all sources used in the show. You can follow for free to access these, and all support is appreciated. You can also simply share the podcast with a friend, a relative, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Let's take a look at recent releases, beginning with a collection of short stories and essays titled Band Together, Our Fight for Readers' Rights, edited by Ashley Hope Pérez and illustrated by Debbie Fong. Featuring 15 authors and illustrators, including Nikki Grimes, Kyle Lukoff, and Tracy Sorrell, this necessary anthology, comprising of fiction, memoir, poetry, comics, essays, and more, equips teens with resources to rally against book bans and fight for the freedom to read. Stories told through varying lenses recount such personal experiences as in Brendan Kiley's O-Town Blues, protagonist Cal's standing against his mother as a teenager protesting book bans, and in Our Whole Radical Anatomy, Kelly Jensen's receiving hate mail which she describes as having your life's work reduced to a count of profanities. Authentic and raw prose and poetry render an educational safe space for readers who persist when cowards try to erase stories and communities from libraries. Echo the resilience and determination it takes for books and people to tackle difficult topics surrounding misogyny, rape culture, and homophobia, and assert that bannings eliminate declarations of existence and the framework for adulthood. Concluding with ample resources such as extensive recommended book lists and examples of what readers can do to support the ongoing fight against book bans, this anthology acts as a call to action and a form of protest, using the power of words to inspire hope and unity. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. Next up, Speechless by Aron Nels Steinke. Jewish 6th grader Mira, portrayed with brown skin, lives with selective mutism, a condition that prevents her from speaking in certain social settings. To cope, Mira channels her creativity to develop stop-motion animation videos, crafting unique puppets and offbeat scripts, which she anonymously posts online. Mira's sanctuary is jeopardized by the arrival of her former best friend, Chloe, who's staying with Mira's family to finish the academic year before joining her parents following a move to Missoula to care for Chloe's ailing grandmother. At school, Mira finds an unexpected ally in non-binary class project partner Alex, who supports her during moments of bullying. As Mira contends with shifting relationships, she attends therapy sessions that mark her progress from whispering to Alex at their seats to speaking at the front of the class. The author draws from personal experience, as addressed in an author's note, to offer realistic insight into selective mutism and its social stigma. Exaggerated cartooning highlights Mira's emotions, blending humor and vulnerability in a heartwarming and visually enticing graphic novel that lauds imagination and self-expression. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next up, The Trouble with Sunshine by Yamile Saied Méndez. In a heartfelt novel about adapting and overcoming personal challenges, Méndez spotlights the camaraderie to be found in difference and the joys one discovers while learning to fit in. 13-year-old Dorani Gutierrez is multi-talented. She's smart, compassionate, revels in learning about her heritage, and always speaks her mind. Though her father, who is of Argentinian descent, is mostly absent, her Puerto Rican mother's presence more than makes up for it. Until her mother dies. Now Dory must leave Miami, as well as her best friend and her mother's fiancé, to live on a ranch in Wyoming with her tia Yvette, her mother's estranged sister. While moving from city to city is a shock, Dory throws herself into her new reality with gusto, even as she grapples with grief. With the help of Sunshine, a horse that Tia is rehabilitating following an automotive accident, Dory makes new friends and inspires good in everyone she meets. Sophisticated first-person narration is imbued with Dory's infectious enthusiasm. Simply rendered conflict, both emotional and interpersonal, allows the novel to maintain an overwhelmingly jovial tone that celebrates all the things that make a family. This book is recommended for ages 9 to 12. Next, A Song for You and I by Kay O'Neill. O'Neill crafts a pastoral fantasy exploring gender identity and what it means to be one's true self in this tender graphic novel. Young Rowan, who has dark hair and brown skin, is a ranger in training, dedicated to helping humans maintain a harmonious balance with nature with their Pegasus partner, Kestrel. Ahead of the name-carving ceremony that will mark the apprentices as fully fledged rangers, Rowan is giving an easy posting, assisting quiet violinist Shepard Leone, portrayed with red hair and pale skin. Rowan's desperation to prove themselves above their assignment results in a devastating injury for Kes that threatens their bond and Rowan's future as a ranger. But as Rowan and Leone spend more time together, Leone's gentle presence allows Rowan to explore their gender identity and passion for their profession in new ways. Rowan's frustrations and fear following Kes's injury are visually and emotionally palpable, as is their shy relief in Leone's easy acceptance of Rowan's identity. Simple paneling allows the fluid line art and soft earth-toned coloring to shine, making for a viscerally powerful romantasy epic. This book is recommended for ages 10 and up. And lastly for this week, Right Back at You by Carolyn Mackler. Ever since his father abandoned the family and his school bully upped the ante on his taunting, middle schooler Mason has been having a tough time. When his therapist asks him to write a letter to anybody or nobody, Mason addresses his correspondence to Albert Einstein, hoping the theoretical physicist can use time travel to, quote, transport me to a time and place where things aren't as sucky. He then throws the letter in his closet and, to his surprise, receives a response the next day from someone named Talia. Even stranger is that while Mason lives in 2023 New York City, Talia purportedly hails from 1987 Western Pennsylvania. Soon the two 12-year-olds are communicating regularly across space and time via their closets, and Mason learns that Talia is teased for being Jewish. Her best friend is freezing her out, and the baseball coach won't let her try out for the team because she's a girl. Author Mackler moves the plot along swiftly and satisfyingly as the resourceful, white-cued protagonists use the time difference to encourage each other to move beyond their comfort zones. This book is recommended for ages 9 to 12. Rounding out this week's episode with headlines, starting with a report from PEN America. Last week, PEN America released their latest report titled Cover to Cover. The report looks at 10,000 instances of book bans across the United States from the 2023-2024 school year. While titles can be reported as banned multiple times across several states and districts, Cover to Cover looks at unique titles to examine trends of book bans. Their methodology breaks down how they used 37 different variables, including LGBTQ+ characters, age level, and the content of the book. The study found that during the 23-24 school year, 36% of all banned titles featured characters or people of color, and 25% including LGBTQ+ characters or people, while 73% of illustrated titles removed featured LGBTQ+ representation, people of color, or discussed race or racism. Pro-censorship activists cite pornographic content. However, only 13% of titles had on-the-page descriptions of sexual experiences. Looking specifically at picture books, which represent 2% of the total number of banned books, nearly two-thirds, 64% of all banned picture books included LGBTQ+ characters or stories. Banned picture books with LGBTQ+ themes include Red, A Crayon Story, My Rainbow, and Stella Brings the Family. Further statistics include the grade level of banned books. Half the books, or 53%, were young adult, and 32% were adult fiction or nonfiction. Adult here means reading level or intended audience, not adult content, just for clarification. Middle grade books make up 11% of banned books, with the remaining 5% being chapter books and picture books. Most harmful of these trends include 23% of all banned titles including sexual assault and violence. Stories like Speak by Laurie House Anderson are important for their ability to empower victims to report their assault, in a time where rape is one of the most underreported crimes, with 63% not being reported to police. Abuse is another topic being censored, with 71% of titles including verbal, emotional abuse, physical abuse, or sexual abuse. Again, stories that empower victims. We do not need to be silencing stories like this, as it propagates a culture where children who are victims of some sort of abuse feel like their situation is abnormal and makes them less likely to report. The full study can be found at pen.org. You can also check patreon.com/thebookfair to find a direct link to the report. Next, HarperCollins debuts a new imprint for young readers. Storytide is a new imprint from HarperCollins with over 30 titles scheduled for 2025, targeting middle grade and teen readers. Storytide will be led by VP and publisher Tara Weekham. Quote, "While Storytide was taking shape, we spent a lot of time focusing on what makes each of our imprints at HarperCollins unique," Weekham said to Publishers Weekly. Quote, "As the pieces fell into place, it became clear to us that the list that became Storytide and the editors who work on these books share a common point of view and sensibility." End quote. Featured authors include Catherine Applegate, author of The One and Only Ivan and the Animorphs series, and Catherine Marsh, author of Nowhere Boy and The Lost Year. Carly J. Corson, Lindsay Miller, and Andrea Hanna and Rebecca Mix. Storytide author Tahera Mafi will host a midnight launch party at Barnes & Noble Union Square on April 14th for her book, Watch Me. More titles from various YA and middle grade authors will come throughout the year. Lastly, to close out the episode, a study shows Little Free Libraries' influence on children reading. A new study shows the significant influence of Little Free Library book sharing boxes on children's reading habits. This study, led by Peer Partners Consultancy Group in collaboration with the Education Foundation of Baltimore County Public Schools, confirms that Little Free Libraries help children read more. The study was conducted across multiple sites from September to November of 2024, including 768 children in Baltimore County, Maryland. Key findings of the study include greater access to books, increased reading time, and home library growth. According to the study, of the children surveyed, 90% of children borrow at least one book each time they visit a Little Free Library. Accounting for the skews in the survey, about half, or 54%, of the children in the study were new patrons of Little Free Libraries. The study, in its summary, also acknowledges that it did not employ a comparison group to examine the differences in outcomes between children who use or do not use a Little Free Library box. 49% of students surveyed reported they read more frequently since they began using a Little Free Library. 88% of children said they now keep books at home, helping them build personal libraries. Little Free Library boxes were also found to impact critical student groups. In low-income schools, 62% of children reported reading more when they visit a Little Free Library, double the rate of their peers in high-income schools, which only saw a 32% increase in reading. 53% of BIPOC students reported reading more compared to 39% of non-BIPOC students. Students learning English as a second language saw the largest increase, with 72% of children in the study reporting reading more in weeks they accessed a Little Free Library. On average, children who visit a Little Free Library read 1.1 more days per week. If you're listening to this podcast, I recommend stopping by your local Little Free Library and making sure it's nice and full, so that children can continue to have access to books in your area. That concludes this week's episode of the Book Faire Podcast. If you'd like to read more of this study or the PEN America cover-to-cover story, you can find links to them at patreon.com/thebookfair. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk to you next time. Come here, kitty.